You're listening to The Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
So many things happening in the NFL. A lot of teams putting on the pads for the first time today in training camp. So for more on the NFL and the top storylines around the league, we go out to the Progressive guest line right now, and we bring on the senior features writer at The Score, the great Dom Cosentino. Dom, appreciate the time as always, my friend. Great to have you back on the show.
Of course, Jake. Thanks for having me. Always good to talk to you, man.
So you recently wrote about Ben Roethlisberger, and it was an interesting take just on the expectations for Ben at this stage of his career. The Steelers, to me, Dom, they're kind of flying under the radar in a sense that they had this really good year that ended so poorly. No one's talking about them as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Big Ben, really, to me, and you wrote about it in your piece, he's the key to everything there. What are your thoughts on the type of season he could potentially have this year for Pittsburgh?
Well, I'm not totally sure, but I guess recent history with Ben Roethlisberger, isn't that wouldn't make one optimistic about where the Steelers are headed, and that's just because of the way that last season ended, in particular, where he was doing a lot of just kind of throwing short passes, that kind of thing, and this their season sort of fell off a cliff, quite frankly. But he's shown a tendency. He was kind of a big volume. Stretch the field quarterback for a number of years. But in recent years, even before the elbow surgery in 2019, he began relying more on the short stuff. Now, I know he was coming off the surgery last season. That may have affected his play, down the stretch, some wear and tear there. But they've got a new coordinator this year in Matt Canada who's going to do, jet sweeps, misdirection, stuff like play action, which requires quarterback to play under center more and even do some sprint outs, things that Roethlisberger, 10 years ago might have been pretty good at, but we haven't seen so much of that from him this year. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that all comes together for Pittsburgh.
Is the AFC North the best division in the league? I mean, you had the Ravens, of course, who have been a playoff team the last couple of years. Pittsburgh was in the playoffs a year ago. It seems like a lot of people think the Browns could be a Super Bowl contender, and obviously the Bengals should be better with Joe Burrow coming back. Is it, to you, the best division in the league right now?
I would still say it's the NFC West, just given it, with San Francisco presumably healthy this year. They're 2 years removed from a Super Bowl. The other three teams, were playoff contenders or playoff caliber. The Seahawks and Rams were there. The Cardinals are kind of hanging around. They've got a bunch of veterans on this year's team. So I would still put the NFC West number one, but certainly the AFC North would be second, I think.
Dom Cosentino with this here covers the NFL for The Score, talking all things NFL and training camp. Dom, a huge story yesterday. The Colts announced Carson Wentz needs foot surgery, and he could be out anywhere from 5 to 12 weeks. Do you think they replace Wentz with an outside move, or are they really going to roll into week one with Jacob Eason as their starting quarterback?
It's a tough call because that 5 to 12 weeks is such a wide range. You're talking about, at 5 weeks, he's back by week one and they have nothing to worry about. At 12 weeks, you're getting 6-7 games into the season, and their opening schedule is pretty brutal. They start with the Seahawks, Rams, Dolphins, Ravens, and Titans, I think, in their first 5. Maybe not in that order, but that's their first 5. So, I think they're going to see how I think what they have to do is see how his rehab progresses following the surgery to get a better idea of when he might be back. And then they might consider pulling the trigger on some kind of backup option, because of the inexperience they've got, currently in their quarterback room. I know Brett Hundley's been around. They added him over the weekend, but there's just their season can really go from being playoff caliber to really going sideways because of that early schedule.
Could they just call Phillip Rivers and see if he'd come out of retirement?
I think they'd love to, but I got the sense that Rivers, pretty much hung it up, and he's got his high school coaching commitments for this fall. But there aren't many great options at this time of year. Unless they want to swing a trade for do they want to bring Jacoby Brissett back? Do they want to introduce Nick Foles into this conversation again with Carson Wentz, Andy Dalton, perhaps if the Bears decide to go with Justin Fields right out of the gate? Jimmy Garoppolo, depending on how things go with Trey Lance. There are options. They're not great options because of what it might cost them in draft capital. And certainly, with someone like Garoppolo, it could be a big cap hit as well. So that, like I said, I think we'll know more in the weeks ahead here as we get closer to week one, see what they do.
You mentioned Nick Foles. That to me would just be fascinating if they bring him back and Wentz has to deal with that all over again. But if the range is 5 to 12 weeks, the Colts have a team that a lot of people think could contend for a playoff spot and maybe make some noise. Like, do you have to swing a trade for Nick Foles if at the end of the day your goal is to try and win this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything's on the table. Frank Reich, of course, worked with Nick Foles the year they won the Super Bowl in Philadelphia. Like I said, if we're close to week 1, I think any option would be on the table because, like you said, this is a playoff caliber team. They were a championship caliber team before Andrew Luck retired, and they've kind of been spinning their wheels. I know they had a playoff berth last year with Rivers, but they've kind of just it really shows the value of having a good quarterback and even having a decent backup. Part of the reason Philadelphia drafted Jalen Hurts before everything went to pot last year was because of Wentz's injury history, to have a capable backup in the event that he might have to play a fair number of snaps. So that's kind of where the Colts are right now.
Dom Cosentino with this year covers the NFL for The Score. Dom, I'm based here in Houston, and I'm seeing reports right now at Texans practice that Deshaun Watson is not out there with the team for the first padded practice. A lot of people were shocked he showed up. People here in Houston didn't think he'd make an appearance, but of course he's been, kind of out there just being there, not really doing much. Do you think anything's changed with Watson? Do you expect him to get moved at some point before week 1 of the season?
It's really hard to say because of the circumstances of his off-field stuff. The allegations against him and what might come down from that. You've got law enforcement investigating. The NFL's kind of lurking there with whatever they're doing to investigate it. I think the Texans are probably at the point where they'd like to move him, but I think any potential trade partners are really hesitant because of the legal issues hanging over his head, and they're very serious. And I think until more is known about that, it's really hard to predict what they might do. The new collective bargaining agreement that mandates $50,000 in fines and game checks lost for preseason games, and the teams can't forgive that kind of stuff, sort of compelled Watson to show up. But he's got a lot of other things to worry about, I think, right now, of his own making, quite frankly, and before we can, really consider what's going to happen, with the on-field stuff.
People I've spoken to have said, well, Nick Caserio won't get ripped off. Like, he'll be able to stand there and just not do anything if it means, not having to trade the guy who's 25 and a franchise guy for, 25 cents on the dollar. Do you believe that, though? Like, or will the Texans be able to handle the potential distraction of, their one-time franchise quarterback just being there off to the side and, waiting for all the legal stuff to play itself out?
Yeah, I mean, they don't. They're in a position where they don't really have to do anything. He's under contract, and they've got to. They're looking to rebuild. Obviously, they'd love to do that with a happy quarterback who's not facing legal trouble for serious allegations like he's facing. But Caserio has, because of this, in a crass way, because of the allegations against Watson, Caserio went from kind of being in a corner to kind of being in a situation where he can afford to sit back and wait because, any potential trading partners are going to wait and see how the legal process plays out, I think, before they want to commit to someone. Do you want to give up 3 or 4 first-round picks and find out that the guy is suspended for half a season or a year or something worse because of these allegations?
Aaron Rodgers did show up to training camp. Ultimately, do you think this ends up being his last year in Green Bay, or are we getting the last dance version with the Green Bay Packers and Rodgers in 2021?
I kind of think this will be it for him. Just the way they redid the contract, it sort of creates a possible escape hatch for him. And just given that the Packers drafted Jordan Love, they obviously did that with the idea that he'd become their quarterback. I think, this sets things up for them to move on 2 years in, so they'll still have Love with 2 years on his rookie contract to kind of continue to shape the roster around that, and then get a potential windfall of a return for trading Rodgers. A lot can change, but just the way that contract was redone with the voided year in 2023 sets things up, I think, for a likely trade after this season. So we'll see, but that's my gut is telling me he'll get moved next off season, and we'll be talking about this all over again in February and March.
Is this Packers team as good as they've been? Like, are they going to be at the end of the day in the mix, for contending for a Super Bowl here and what could be, as you pointed out, Rodgers' final season?
I think as long as Rodgers is healthy, I certainly think so. They've got a pretty well-rounded roster. They've won 13 games the last 2 seasons, despite all of whatever drama there might have been. He's got every incentive to play well. If he's looking to get traded, because it'll only enhance his trade value. That's an incentive for the Packers as well, because it enhances their possible return. So he's played angry. He's played very well when he's been angry before. So I don't see any reason to doubt that won't be the case again this season.
Great stuff, Dom. Thanks as always for a few minutes here. Appreciate your time and continued success at the Score.
Thanks, Jake. Always great talking to you again. Take care, man.
Dom Cosentino joining us there on our Progressive Guest Line. Does an excellent job. Senior features writer at the Score, covers the NFL for them and does a good job breaking it all down. Good spot there with Dom on our Progressive Guest Line. Drivers who save with Progressive save over $750 on average. Plenty still to talk about. We talk some baseball next. The Yankees got some bad news with their ace. And, well, they also lost to the Orioles last night. So when you lose to the Orioles, and that's not the worst part of your day, that's not good. We talk about the Yankees and Garrett Cole having the Rona next here on the Jake Asman Show on Sports Map Radio.
Headed to Texas to watch your team play, but don't know where to go for that pregame drink? Visit culturemap.com for all of the hottest spots in Houston, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Antonio.